Welcome back. In the last video, I showed you how to do a basic data import. In this video, I'm going to show you how to handle 10 of the most commonly made data import errors. And you're going to want to stick around to the end because I'm going to show you a trick that all consultants use to handle data imports, especially very large or complicated ones with zero errors. So let's take a look at this. So we're going to go back to our import. So import export, we're going to go to import CSV records. And just like in the previous video, I'm going to do a transaction and we're going to select a sales order. So that's what we're importing. These other settings are fine. So we want to select our file. So first off, let's take a look at the file because that's our first line of defense for making errors. So we're going to click on this file and this is all the information. And you'll notice that this matches almost identically to what we had in the last video, but there's errors throughout this thing. The most immediate one and obvious one you're going to see is this missing field here, but we've got errors, we've got typos, all kinds of things in here. So we're going to go through a few different rounds and really flesh out what are all the errors that we're running into, and I'm going to show you how to fix them. So for now, just understand that we're going to take a look at this. You want to make sure that you can spot anything in the beginning to avoid having to go through the process of getting an error message, fixing it, and redoing potentially a very long import. So we're going to leave this as is for now. I'm just going to minimize this a bit so it takes up a little bit less space, and I'm going to close it. And we're going to make sure we have that file selected. So we're going to go to data test import errors, and we've got that selected. So now we can hit next. We're fine with adding these files. They don't already exist in the system. So we'll hit next. Okay, so we come to this mapping page, and this is the first time we're going to see an error. And it's really the second location after looking at the spreadsheet itself. This is the next place you want to see if there's any obvious mistakes you're making. And one of them is we're going to see that the mappings happened fine everywhere else, but in this one field, it's trying to find what the item is, but it doesn't know what to link it to because nothing in our spreadsheet was called items. If we pull up this sheet, this column was incorrectly called sales. Now you could say, well, they're sales and those sales have items, but really that's an incorrect name for that thing. And so if we come over here, we've got sales. So we know that that is what we're looking for. When NetSuite's considering item, really in our spreadsheet, it's looking for sales. But you're not going to want to have an error like that because it's easy. If you have a dumbly named column, it's easy to open the door to having incorrect mapping. So you want to make sure your columns are named appropriately. But now that we have that mapped, we're going to just take a double check, make sure that everything is matching up correctly. There's no other silly mistakes, and we're fine with that. So we're going to hit next. Okay, so automatically you can see we got an error message here, and it's basically, they didn't catch all the errors, but at least caught ones that it automatically knew wasn't going to fly. So it's probably a little hard for you to see, but it's saying things like there's some of the field values, $100, that's wrong. Something's wrong with the date. So we've got a number of different errors here. These dollar ones, I'll explain that problem in a second. But we've got these error messages. So let's pull up our original file and I'll explain what these errors are and how to avoid them. So let's go to this import file. So the first thing, and the most obvious, is this missing field. So missing field, especially for a mandatory column, in this case, customer, you have to have that field in there. So if it was on something location, it would simply leave location blank. But for name, we have to have a name there. So you can have missing fields because you accidentally hit delete, or maybe you didn't drag a date down far enough. Anything could be a result of that, but that is the easiest one to catch. So in this case, I know that this is Devavu. So I'm going to type that in. And then the second thing was a date problem. So let's just look at our dates and eyeball it and see if there's an obvious problem here. And we'll see it right here. So not only is this formatted a little weirdly, it's formatted weirdly because it doesn't recognize it as a date. And that's because we have our month and our day mixed up. So notice these are month 11, 16 day, year 2019. This one's reversed. Now, technically that's a typo, but you can run into all kinds of problems with dates. And really what I want to point out is that the formatting can be wrong. For example, if we have 5-5-19, it's not the format that NetSuite wants. And the way to check that is to simply go back to NetSuite here. And if we go to Home, Set Preferences, and if we scroll down here, you're going to see under formatting, we have date format. So this is what NetSuite's expecting, month/day/full year. So that's what we need to give to it. And where you can run into problems with that, especially if you're in a different country that has different formatting styles, or if your computer just has a default formatting for its dates that is not what NetSuite's anticipating, it's going to give you error message, and it could error out on an entire 20,000 sales orders data import. So you definitely want to avoid that and make sure you've got the right date format. So to fix this one, we would do 5-5- full 2019. We'd put that in, and that one will go through correctly. The next problem that we ran into was these dollar signs. So NetSuite doesn't want a dollar sign. It already knows what the currency is, right? Because we specified the customer, which then tells us what the subsidiary and what the currency is. So NetSuite just wants plain figures like this, or like the amount here. So the way to handle that, we'll select the column, we'll go to the formatting here, and we'll select general. And that will take out all the dollar signs, and that's exactly what NetSuite wants. The next thing was this 7,500. So this is a problem of the comma. And again, this is a CSV file, so we don't want any weird commas anywhere throughout this, and especially just that formatting with the comma in the middle, it doesn't like that. So we're gonna go back here, again, we'll select general, takes out the comma, no problem with that. So we've solved now the problems that it immediately recognized would be a problem. There are other errors in here, but we've solved the immediate burning fires. Let's also, while we're here, we'll change that to item, hit enter on that. Okay, good, and we'll hit Control Save. And I'm not gonna close it, but I'm gonna minimize that. And let's go back to our import. So we had the error messages here, so let's go back to our original file. You'll see it here, so let's remove that file, and we'll reattach the file that we just saved. So let's go back through the process, next, next. Now notice sales isn't here anymore because we changed the name on that, so it kind of doesn't know what it's grabbing now. So we have to just drag item back over there. And let's just double check. Let's make sure nothing else weird happened. Everything seems fine, so let's hit next. So we don't get any error messages. We know that it at least doesn't recognize any problems. So let's now add our title. So test import, let's say 4. Okay, good, and then we can add a little description here, and then we'll hit save and run on that. Okay, so let's go to the import job status like I showed you in the last video. We can track it. And I'm not gonna make you sit here and wait for this whole process, so I'll cut out the dead time so that we can go straight to 100%. All right, so we just finished the import, and we can see we've got it completed 100% and only 7 of 11 records. So keep in mind, it's only 11 records, right? There's 14 lines, but some of those are multiple items on one sales order. 7 of them went through fine, so those are now in NetSuite. We could look them up, we could pull all that information up. 4 of them had some kind of a problem, and to find out what that problem was, we open this CSV response. So we click on that, and it's basically gonna download our same spreadsheet, but it's gonna take out everything that went through successfully and only leave what did not go in, and it's gonna give us a new column that explains what the error is. So we're gonna open up this results document, and we can actually close our original, so now we can just work with this one. And we're gonna make it a little bit smaller over here. I'm gonna try to make that a little bigger for you guys. And let's expand that out. So this first is the error column. So it's explaining what is the problem that we're running into. So first off, the invalid item, in other words, invalid item name. So this one had a wrong name. We also have a wrong name for this. And notice these blanks, that simply means that these are all the same sales order. So it's already explained what the error is here, and it's not gonna give it to you again. And then this had an invalid location, and this was again a wrong item name. So now that we know what the problems are, let's see what's happening here. So first off, the item name. So that's the real issue we're running into on this one. And the problem that we're actually having here is this ampersand. So ampersands in NetSuite mean literally and. So this thing and this thing. So to have it just as a title name, either a customer name or an item name, you can't have that in NetSuite. You need to find something else to represent that. You can type out the words and, you could do a plus sign, anything else but no ampersands. So the actual name of this item is a dash. Okay, now this one also, this whole sales order had a problem with the name, and it wasn't in this first line, it was actually in the second line, and it was with the del, this trademark symbol. It's considered a special character. NetSuite can't accept special characters, so make sure you don't have them in your item names. It won't even let you bring in an item name that has a special character, but if you ever see them in a database or in a spreadsheet, simply take it out. And again, that is the correct title for this. There wasn't supposed to be a special character there. So with that deleted, this one will be fine. The next one down was actually a typo here, Boston. So obviously that's misspelled. So let's spell Boston correctly because it was looking through for a location. If we had left it blank, it would have been fine because it would simply say, okay, there's no location. Location's not a mandatory field. But because it was misspelled, it was looking for it and couldn't find it. And then down from that, we again have an error here. Now this is where things get interesting because this type of error is the hardest to spot. When you're looking through your spreadsheets and you're looking for obvious errors, this one is going to be almost impossible to find. And that's a problem of a non-exact match. In other words, NetSuite needs exactly the correct naming, formatting, the spaces in all the right places, all proper punctuation and spelling. It needs it to be perfect. And if anything's wrong, even if it's a little thing that you wouldn't notice, it will error out. And so the problem that we have here is if we click on this, there's supposed to be a space on either side of that dash. And we have the same item up here so you can kind of compare and see how it's supposed to look. So that kind of problem, again, it's almost impossible to be able to look through your spreadsheet and go, oh, that's going to have an error message. So the question is, how do you avoid having those errors? And how do you know that, especially on a larger import, it's going to work fine and you really don't have to meticulously look through to see if there's a problem with that? Well, there's a trick, and this is used by all consultants to avoid any kind of errors like this. And the way that you do it is you're basically going to utilize the internal ID on the NetSuite side. So by referencing these items, because these items they're all existing already in NetSuite, and they have an internal ID in NetSuite. So we're going to use that internal ID to basically give NetSuite what it wants exactly in a way that it will easily accept the data. So the way that we go about doing this trick basically is using a formula called VLOOKUP. And what we're going to do is, because we're dealing with item, we need to first know on the NetSuite side, what does it consider the internal ID is for all these items? So let's go back to NetSuite for a second. And we're going to let's go to this tab and use this to pull up the list, accounting. We'll go down to items. If we click on that, it's going to pull up all the items that are existing in NetSuite, and it's also going to give us the internal IDs. So we can actually take this spreadsheet and we can import it as a CSV file. So we're going to need that. So we click this little button over here and it downloads the CSV file of all the items that your NetSuite instance has. So it pops up here, and let's make that a little bit bigger. And I'm going to take these two and I'm going to make them larger. So we've got internal ID here, and then here's the item name. Okay. So I'm going to try to make this a little smaller so we can try to fit both of these in the same field. Okay, so if we go over to the right here, so we have the item, and now let's add another field here. Okay, so we have item here, and then this is the same, right? This is the item name. This is the same item name over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another field, and we're going to say item internal ID. Okay, and then the first thing we need to do on this side is, because what we're going to do is going to match these items to these items here. And the way we want to do that is on the directory side, or this list we have over here that has the NetSuite items. We want to have the thing that we're matching the furthest to the left. So this column here, it's not all the way to the left, right? It's still got internal ID here. So we want to copy this column. We're going to right click here, and we're going to hit Insert Cut Cells. Not paste, because what we want to do is we're swapping the internal ID and the name. So the name's all the way against the left. And once we've done that, we're going to go back to our spreadsheet here, and we're going to type in this formula. So we're going to do equals VLOOKUP. And that basically stands for value lookup. So in other words, it's looking for a value in another location. And once it finds that, it's going to give you some data. And the data you're going to get is the internal ID for that matched item name. So the first thing it's going to ask is, well, what are you looking for in the first place? And you're going to specify in your own information. I'm looking for this the item name. So I've clicked on this column. It's going to grab all of those item names. And the next thing I need to specify is, where am I getting this information? So I'm going to look for these items. I'm going to look for it in this database. So I'm going to click this corner here, and that's basically going to grab everything in that database. So once I've clicked that, I'm going to hit comma once more. So the next piece of information it has is, once it finds a match between our item name and the item name on this side, we want the internal ID. So we need to specify this column is where we want to get our information from. In other words, we want it to tell us the internal ID. But to specify that, you would think you would just click the column, but unfortunately it doesn't work that way. It wants you to tell it what's the number of that column. So if we consider column A is 1, column B would be 2. So if you had internal ID, let's say on column D, you would put a 4. In this case, we have it on B, so we're going to put a 2. And then we're gonna hit comma again. And now the last thing it's gonna ask us is, do you want an exact match or do you want approximate match? Do you want them to be close? And we don't want them to be close. So we're gonna say false. We're not okay with them being close. We want them to be an exact match. And we're gonna hit enter on that. And we get this, it's not even an error message, it's a warning message saying, hey, you're grabbing things that might have empty cells. Are you okay with that? And we are. So we're gonna hit yes. And we can see it came up with 108. So we do want to side check if that's the correct number. So let's go back over here and let's make this a little bigger. So we're looking for this item in this field. So if we go down, we can find it here, this iPad Pro, and notice the internal ID is 108 and we know 108. So this formula worked correctly. So now we can grab that formula, drag it down, and it populates all these internal IDs for every single item that we have. So the formula is working great. The one last thing we want to do with this is we want to grab this entire column. We want to hit Control, and we want to paste the exact values that we see here. So notice they look the same, but now instead of having the whole formula here, it now just has the internal IDs that we're looking for. So by having those not formulas, but exact numbers, you avoid the problem of having the formulas get messed up. Maybe they can't grab from the original source material. And what you can do now is, especially if you have a much longer import, you can look through all the internal IDs, just scroll through them and make sure you have a number in every place. As soon as you come across a field that has an error message or it doesn't give you an actual value, you know that that name that it's looking for, in other words, the name that's to the left of it, something's wrong with that and it wasn't able to match it up with the spreadsheet from NetSuite. So then before you've gone through the whole import process, just in kind of QCing and looking through to see if there's any errors, you could spot it, fix the name, the exact problem with that, it would come up with a correct value, and then you know that what you're gonna import, at least from that standpoint, is gonna be perfect. So we have the internal ID now. So at this point, the last thing we're gonna do here, so we're gonna go to the left here and we're gonna delete this error column. So now we just have the remaining items to import and we have our internal ID. So we're gonna hit save. Now keep in mind what we're saving is this results file, this results CSV file. So with that, we're gonna go back to NetSuite. We're gonna go to the job status. So here's where we had the 7 out of 11. So we're gonna hit new. Go back to transactions. We'll do a sales order. And we're going to download that results file. So we'll go to, we've got our downloads here, and this is the most recent results. So we'll click on that. That's the one we were making edits to. So we'll go now to next. We're fine with adding these. Now we didn't have them in there before, right? We're not updating something. Everything else went through. These remaining ones that errored out, they didn't go in at all. So all we have to do is add these ones. So we'll hit next. Okay, now here we do need to do something because notice we have this item internal ID on the left side here. Now what we need to do, because the problem is right now it's mapping our item column to the item column, and that's the problem that we ran into in the first place. So even though we fixed those errors, just to show you what you would do in this case, you would actually take item internal ID and you'd replace item. So in other words, what you're telling NetSuite is, you want to know what the item name is? Okay, fine. I'm going to have you look at this internal ID. And the problem is you don't want to necessarily replace the item name in NetSuite with an internal ID. That's a wrong name. But what you're going to do is you're going to put internal ID here, and then you're going to hit edit. And you're going to tell NetSuite, I want you to look at this as an internal ID. So you're going to select that and you're going to hit OK. And so what it's going to do is it's going to look in that column. It's going to go, oh, these are internal IDs. Fine. I'm not going to replace the name, or I'm not going to put the name as an internal ID. I'm just going to look at that internal ID. I'm going to look at my own system, match it to what I know that name is, and then I'm going to put that name in where the name field goes for that sales order. So that's all correct. If you did this trick with VLOOKUP, you would just want to make sure that you do that step of mapping it correctly and then hit next. Okay, so we have to do the name again. Let's do test import 5 or 6. That's fine. And then we're going to hit save and run. Good, so we'll go back to import job status. Now this one should go pretty quickly. All right, and just like that, we get 100%, 4 out of 4 records imported successfully. So that little trick with the VLOOKUP handled the problem entirely. And that's it for handling the most common data import errors. And I do want to stress that that last trick of using VLOOKUP, in this case, I just used it for replacing out the item name, but you can use that for anything that NetSuite has an internal ID for. That can be used for customers, accounts, subsidiaries, anything. And once you get the hang of using VLOOKUP, you can do that swap out in about 30 seconds. So even if you have a very large spreadsheet that you're importing from, in other words, it could have, whether it's 5 records or 50,000 records, it really doesn't matter. The formula takes the same amount of time. You could replace out all the fields that have internal IDs in a matter of minutes and save yourself the heartache of waiting hours for a larger data import to finish, only to find out that there's errors all over the place that you now need to individually fix. So if you can get the hang of VLOOKUP, it will get you to the point where you can have large data imports flawlessly with no errors. So I wish you the best of luck.